Okay. All right, Ms. Castillo. Well, thank you for having me in your class. It was last week at the very beginning of the week.
Yes.
Those snow days were in the middle. Do you remember back to the lesson that we had observed?
Yes, I do.
Cool. Tell me a little bit. I know that we've been focusing a lot on our I do and really thinking about the different aspects of that. Tell me a little bit about how you felt that went.
It was too long. I feel that it was too long, but it's the first day that I was introducing not the first time, but we haven't written an informative essay in such a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So we needed several refreshers and start thinking about, okay, this is something that we have done in the past. These are the procedural steps that we have followed in the past as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main reason it was too long. But in general, I think it went pretty well.
Cool. So I hear you thinking a lot about time and the length, but then you said it went in general pretty well. Tell me a little bit about why or what you're thinking about when you say pretty well.
We were making some connections with things that we have previously used. One of them was like the W questions that we had there that we use for the categories. I was in the past we have been practicing on how to read a text, and while we're reading it, we're not just trying to decode the words, but thinking about what's happening in this text. Why did that happen? How are they going to solve it? Like using those words, or those question words, to gain more knowledge about what they're learning.
Yeah, awesome.
Or what they're reading.
Yeah, I definitely saw like both you and students really being able to like get at the heart of making connections back. Like you even had those two posters up. You had the information and then the opinion, and we're able to go back and forth. So kids were like building that background knowledge really strongly, and it was very clear that both you and students were understanding this idea of using why, what, and how. In fact, you actually said and connected back to like what your written CLO was about the why, what, and how 12 times. That's huge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I think that, you and students were able to follow so clearly as to like, okay, here's what our focus is and here's where we're going with this.
Perfect.
So yeah, kudos to that. So when we kind of are thinking, and I heard you mentioning this idea around length, and you said like, oh, we were kind of going back and forth and we were having to go over the structure of the essay and then getting at like the heart of what was happening that day, which I'm sure kind of helped to contribute to some of that length piece, because you were really kind of tackling two ideas, right? Both in which what is the flow of the paragraph and the structural design, and your lesson for that day was really reading that article.
Yes.
And being able to ask and answer those questions.
Correct. And by the way, before you came, that's why I think it was so long, because we were actually using like a globe to learn more about where Somalia is and how people immigrate. And sometimes they don't necessarily come to the United States. They might immigrate to other countries as well.
Totally.
So we were touching base on that, and we were talking about the dance, the Dreamers dance, to remind ourselves of some of the things that were happening with immigrant families. So, yeah.
I thought it was so cool that you were making connections, though, to the dance show. So, yeah, you were definitely connecting in both conceptual ideas to the dance show around immigration and around like the topics of those articles. You also made connections procedurally into how do we use this information now and put that into a condensed essay that really highlights different topics. And then again, you were going back to that procedural and conceptual when you started to think about how do we do this with any informational topics and how does that compare to our opinion piece that everyone had just finished. So when I'm thinking about kind of this idea then of getting really into the heart of your lesson, which was the idea of reading this article and going through and asking ourselves the why, what, and how questions. You had this really strong idea that you were very, very clear in modeling your thinking. So when you were reading through the Somalia paragraph, you stopped several times to say, okay, so this part right here is when she's talking through like what they're doing once they come. This is going to be my what paragraph. This will be my why paragraph. This is my how paragraph. And you were going for it there.
Okay.
Some things I'm thinking about within there is you were able to very clearly in your modeling discern which sentences let you know why it was a what, why, and how paragraph.
Okay.
And you did that almost automatically. And so something I'm thinking about is being able to really think through in our modeling, why you're choosing certain sentences and why you're not choosing certain
Perfect.
sentences. So it was almost like when we were going in and we were modeling, you would read, the Somalians came over and there were so many of them on there. And you did nothing with it. And then on the next sentence you would read, and then they were able to create homes and family members. I want to highlight that, and I'm going to mark that that's what they did after they came.
Okay.
However, as a student, you might be thinking to yourself, why did she choose that sentence over the sentence before it? What makes that sentence the one that's so important?
Okay.
What are some thoughts that you're having as I talk through that idea?
We've used that before. So I think that I have practiced with them so many times that sometimes when we're reading, and that's something that I should have mentioned this time as well, but while I'm reading, I'm like, okay, is this why this is happening? Is this how this is happening? I don't know, like we keep asking all those questions to ourselves several times until we figure out, oh, this is the perfect sentence that I need for the how, or this is the perfect sentence that I need for the why, to explain why something is happening. They didn't take the time during the lesson though to touch base on that aspect one more time, but it's something that they have been exposed to before.
Right. Yeah, and so I'm like just thinking about, because it was almost like kids were still wondering, or like when you had asked them questions, if we think through these different parts of this rubric when we're like, okay, so here's where we really want to target into the visual and conceptual procedural understanding to that concept.
Okay.
So it's like that was the key part of your lesson, right? So your objective was to identify the why, what, and how. It's almost like what we really want to do first is that we want to be able to identify themes and categories in order to
Perfect.
identify the why, what, and how. Because ultimately you are going through and saying, this is a key theme. It's in the theme of the what, or this is the category of how. But showing kids, how do I identify that?
Perfect.
And so maybe that is asking yourself after every sentence, is this the why, what, and how? Maybe that's being able to explain how you knew that was the key sentence.
Perfect. Asking questions to myself during I do. Got it.
Okay, so I feel like you wrote down a great action step. What did you write down here? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, I had to be more explicit on that section for sure, especially since we did this type of essay during the Animal Defense Mechanisms unit. So it was like maybe 5-6 weeks ago since we haven't done an essay that it's informative. We spent the rest the time after that on writing opinion essays, and I feel like they're pretty comfortable with those, and I didn't need to model as much or take as much time like modeling for them the steps or my thinking, and I think that's something that I didn't take into consideration while I planned my lesson for sure. So yeah, just asking more questions and just verifying, like even asking them, even though it's not part of the I do, but sometimes I'm doing most of the talk, but asking the students just to see, and that goes again with the checks for understanding, just to make sure that they are understanding my thinking, like the steps that I'm taking to find that perfect sentence for my writing later on.
Yeah, yes, awesome, because that's where we could see, like, if I chose one of the sentences that you skipped might be a time to be like, should I highlight this as a key category? Why or why not?
Why or why not?
And that could be
that turn and talk, maybe.
Yep, that quick turn and talk to say like, oh, are kids really understanding how to identify or discern what information here is most relevant or that leads to the theme or key characteristics?
Perfect. Students about it.
Okay. So really it's just like taking a lot of this stuff and getting even more targeted and like into whatever the learning or the action is going to be for that specific day.
Perfect.
As you think about a lesson that's coming up later this week, how does this connect with some of that maybe?
Well, the snow days really mess up my schedule. So we're going to have an extra essay about, an extra informative essay. So we're going to go over this procedural piece. I'll make sure that I'm modeling a little bit more how I'm choosing those sentences and why, and then giving the students the opportunity to think by themselves. Will you choose that sentence? Why or why not? And be strong about it. Be more specific. Give me some reasons. Why? Why are you choosing that sentence? Why do you think that's not an effective one, but why do you think that information is relevant?
Yeah. Awesome. So if you were able to do this, I think that would really help strengthen that I do. In what ways do you think it's going to help strengthen your I do?
Well, it's the checking for understanding. Before the students get to work independently, they need to be able to understand what they have to do. If they don't understand it, that means that we need additional practice before they can be able to do it independently. So just going over those steps again and making sure, okay, does this really make sense? Are you really getting the concept? Are you really understanding how I'm finding this relevant information within the text? Are you able to do it? Yes, no? Okay, let's practice one more time. We can practice with a new paragraph or even a new article, and it's totally fine, especially that day that I had 2 articles available for them.
Awesome, Ms. Castillo.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Is there any other thoughts or questions you're kind of sitting with or thinking about?
Let's go back to this rubric that we have here.
Yep.
Well, this is something that I didn't feel comfortable with for sure. While I was explaining, Maggie, do you think that the students had like good directions for them to follow what I was doing? Or do you think that I skipped that part, that I was not as specific as I should have been?
Everyone in your room was really following along and monitoring. I think that that's like a mix of a few different things, right? Like that contributes, I think, just to your classroom culture. I think that contributes to the fact that you were making it really relevant for students and they were actually excited about the topic. And additionally, yes, you were very clear on saying kind of like, here's what we're doing here. You were like get out the whiteboard so that you can make sure that you're following with this. You even said at one point, like, I'm going to be asking you, I wrote it down somewhere, but it was like, I'm going to be asking you for the category. So students knew that there was like expectations involved in their thinking and following.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah, because that one I was like, I'm usually more specific about my directions. And that day I was like, nope, just go grab your whiteboard. Here's your paper. Just follow along with me.
I think there was, honestly, from like what I was gathering, and I was able to see almost all the students sitting there, there was no one that seemed to be like off task or no one that was noteworthy of being such.
Good.
Done. Yes.
You better be working. This is the one that I struggled the most with, having the visual support for both. I think that I did a good job this time with this one. I like the connections as well. With the why, what, and how. Not really. This was not very strong either. I don't feel. The what was really strong.
Yes.
The why was really strong. But the how was not very strong. This is the one that I need to improve next time.
And I think that's going to connect with your next step here. Like, how are we actually discerning how to create and identify the themes and categories in order to do these steps? So, yeah, I think that directly connects. So,
perfect.
Yep.
No, I don't have any more questions, I guess. I think
okay.
I feel comfortable now.
Well, I'm really excited. When are you doing your next lesson that you were just kind of speaking to?
We're going to start tomorrow.
Okay.
Because today we were finishing the essay from last week. So tomorrow we get to go over these steps again so we can have time on Wednesday and Thursday. And maybe sometime on Friday, because it will be a busy day for sure, to do a narrative writing.
Cool. Well, maybe I'll be able to stop in and can give you some more.
That would be great. Yeah,
okay.
it will be tomorrow morning, as usual, like 8:05, 8:07, right after we finish with breakfast.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Castillo. It was really exciting. I think that I can like remember your first I do till now. And even your first one was so good. I mean, let's just be honest.
Thank you.
But like you're really nailing all of these different aspects, and it's becoming this like very structured and effective time for your like learners, and you can see it in them too. Like they know what's happening, what am I doing. They're following with you, you're moving around, and you're like using your charts, you're using your PowerPoint, but you're hitting all of your key concepts in multiple ways.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah.
Thank you so much, Maggie. I was gonna say one more thing. Well, I started to follow. I think that my ideas started to improve when I went with you with the procedural section of the lesson and the conceptual section of the lesson. It's when like everything clicked and I was like, oh, this makes sense. I can follow those steps.
I got this.
Now it makes sense. Now I understand how to use EL. My life changed after that. Thank you,
Well done.
Maggie.
All right.